Here's how President Biden began his day a half hour before the New York Stock Exchange opened today.
I want to briefly speak about what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills. And their hardworking employees can breathe easier as well.
Joining us now is Jen Psaki, former White House press secretary. Her new show, Inside with Jen Psaki, premieres this Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, right here on MSNBC. Jen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What we just saw the president say was in the making over the course of the weekend, with possible changes happening by the day, certainly by the hour. Take us inside what you would have been doing if you were still in the White House, working in the White House on this weekend.
Well, it's safe to say that the president, senior members of the White House team, the economic team, even spokespeople were working around the clock this weekend in the White House, because when you have a situation like this, one that's so fragile with the economy, it's a race against time until the markets open. So over the course of the weekend, from officials I spoke to, they were obviously making decisions about what policies they were going to put in place to what they were going to do with this bank. And most importantly, and you saw the president announce this morning, they made decisions about how to keep depositors whole. So the American people, the public, the people who had their money in these banks, to ensure that they had the confidence that they would get their money back. And why that is so important is because they knew as soon as the markets open, Lawrence, and this is why the president did it before they did, that there could be panic. People could be fearful. People could be rushing to banks to try to get their money out. And they knew that the first thing they needed to accomplish on Monday morning was to create calm. They needed to make the policy decisions over the course of 48 hours to make sure the president was positioned to do that.
And there's a very sharp distinction here between the concern about depositors, including big depositors. There are depositors in that bank that have millions in that bank, but a lot of those millions were part of payroll that were supposed to go out to workers in Silicon Valley over the next week or two. And so the president's trying to protect all of that, but not the investors in the bank. If the bank's stock price goes down to zero, according to the president's analysis, the White House has no interest in that outcome.
That's such an important point, especially because the financial crisis, which we all lived through, and the president was the vice president during, of course, there's a little post-traumatic stress disorder for a lot of people around that, right? Because during the financial crisis, because the financial system was on the brink of collapsing, investors, many of the investors, were also made whole by using taxpayer funds and money. That is not what they're doing here. They're making depositors whole. So the American people, people who are putting their money in these banks, including large amounts of money, to your point, people who are trying to make payroll, by using and tapping into a fund that banks paid into. And there is a big difference. The White House is going to continue to have to explain this, but there is a big difference from what happened and how it was handled back in 2008 and 2009, which was a very, very different scenario, too.
Yeah, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation wasn't really involved in 2008. This is the key operation here that I've been explaining to my friends over the course of the weekend, that all of your bank deposits are insured by the federal government right up to $250,000. And most bank deposits are below that. And so it covers most. But this bank was wildly unbalanced in terms of just how much of the deposits in this bank, it wildly exceeded the $250,000 limit, which made the bank all the more precarious.
That's right. And you've been talking about this through the course of the show. And Rachel was talking about this earlier with Senator Warren. Back in 2018, when Trump signed into law, and many people supported, mostly Republicans, a rollback, deregulation, what happened is that the eyes that regulators would have had on banks like these two were not on them anymore. There weren't the same requirements, capital requirements to have a certain amount of money in their reserves, the same stress tests that were used used on banks to make sure that they had what they needed in reserves, those were taken away. So there are going to be big eyes. We're already hearing this in Washington, and we're already hearing this from a lot of Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, who led that fight back in 2018, that they want to put those regulations back in place because there should be eyes on these banks and there should be tests in the system, even the smaller and middle-sized banks, to make sure that things like this don't happen again.